Right, so welcome everyone to our weekly call, which, as you'll be aware, this week the main sort of topic of conversation is going to be the forthcoming IETF and DNS-OARC meetings. So to that, let me just share my slides, which says exactly that. So we talk about ITF114 first and then DNS-OARC. And as we've done in the past, what I propose to do essentially is just to run through the sort of some of the key items on the agenda that I've spotted, and others, if you had a chance to look at the agenda, if there are other things as we go through that you think are pertinent, please just chip in and mention them. Because there's bound to be a few interesting things that I've missed, particularly as still quite a few of the working group sessions have yet to publish their agendas. So it's quite difficult to guess in every case what might be on the agenda, unless you sort of dip into the individual working group mailing lists, which is quite time consuming. But as I say, so if any of you have got any inside sort of views on anything else that people should be aware of, then shout it out as we run through. And then, as always, I'll touch on a couple of other sort of recent developments from the last week or so that have been in the news, and just remind you of some forthcoming events and topics for future calls. And commiserations to Arno, who's just I know he's on the call currently, but is suffering from COVID. So sadly, that Arno, hopefully you make a swift recovery from that. Bad timing to have it, particularly with all the hot weather as well. So yeah. Anyway, let's talk about the ITF114 agenda first. So what I've done, and obviously put the links for these out afterwards with the sort of links for the call recording, etc. It's just literally for each of the sessions. Just I've highlighted one or two working groups which, for various reasons, I thought would be of interest to people, and if I think it's particularly useful, I've highlighted sort of topics of a special interest, just to identify why, but I've not done that in every case. So just going to run through these in chronological order, and as I said, if on each day as I run through these, if you think I've missed something for that day, please pop it in the chat, raise your hand, or find some other way of sort of attracting my attention, and make sure that or you sort of add that to the list as I roll through, because I definitely might have picked up everything that warrants attention. But okay, starting next Monday, so it really is next Monday now, so it's come around pretty quickly. The first session I've highlighted on the Monday morning is the dispatch session, which, amongst other things, literally has on its agenda birds of a feather sessions, updates, and meetings of interest. So that seemed like a useful thing to highlight. That should be pretty up to date by then, because I would hope that all the working group agendas will be published by Monday morning. So there's a few minutes on the agenda then, which it might be worth dipping into if you have the opportunity. Then perhaps more usefully on Monday. In the second session of the sort of two working groups of interest. One is PEARG, one of the research groups, which has got a couple of topics on the agenda, one of which is comparison between privacy preserving measurement systems, which sort of looked interesting to me, may or may not be something that will catch your imagination. But at the same time that working group is taking place, we've also got the Transport Area Open Meeting, which again, one of its agenda items is the future of congestion control at the IETF. And they've got a sort of quite a large amount of time devoted to that topic on their agenda for that working group. So as it's a sort of future direction of travel for discussion, that's certainly one that people may wish to join if your diaries permit. And then later on in the third session on Monday, again, two working groups have highlighted. One is the TLS working group. From a quick look at the agenda, which has just come out, I'm not 100% convinced about that, but it does touch on a couple of ECH related matters, for example. Yeah, that probably wouldn't be the top of my list if I'm honest. The other one, which is usually a good value, is the IETF open meeting. Although I think when I looked, the agenda wasn't available for that. So at the moment, that's a guess rather than 100% sure that there will be a topic of interest on the agenda for that meeting itself. But it certainly usually is. So those are the sort of first handful from the many sessions on Monday, bearing in mind there are, I think, 8 parallel tracks throughout the week. So that's out of the initial selection of 24. I'll just pause there in case anyone who's on the call who's had a chance to look at it, which you may or may not have done, but if you have anything else that caught your imagination on Monday that you think is worth just mentioning to others. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment. So I assume not. If anyone does, you can always pop it in the chat as we roll through. Okay, moving on to Tuesday. The first one in session 1 is the SSEC Dispatch group, even, which hasn't yet published its agenda. I know Arno is hopeful that he might get sort of time on the agenda for his recent ECH paper. I don't know if you heard anything on that, Arno, and whether you're in a position to actually talk, even if you have heard anything. If not, you can always put something in the chat if you're able. If you know whether you've got any agenda time as yet. Probably also worth saying, by the way, that since Arno posted to the mailing list, the SSEC Dispatch mailing list, thus far there haven't been many responses to his post, and I think it would help the chairs if anyone that thinks it's a useful topic for discussion to say so on the mailing list, as that makes it easier for the chairs to find agenda time if there is any. But if you wanted to come in there, Arno, if you have heard or not.
Hey, Andrew, can you hear me?
Yes.
I have an echo.
Yeah, you're certainly audible, Arno.
Okay, so yeah, so I've not received support apart from you, I think, Andrew. But I'm basically getting a pushback on this draft. And for some, it's valid reasons, because people would not know what to dispatch to where. In fact, if they would be a bit more mindful, they would understand that there is an element that would go for TLS, because, in fact, the client-facing server is clearly becoming a middle box. So if they would be coherent, at least we could start to look at how to improve their protocol to include a real middle box model. Not that it would be without consequences, of course, but at least it would force a number of parties to admit that they are making a middle box. The second part has to do with the dispatching to Smart or Model T. I don't know where the teams are on that. Sorry for my voice, Andrew. But one issue that they have is that they believe that they can make the browser like immune to any code vulnerability, but it's not true today. So they could look at Dispatch, but they don't want. So I reached out to Lars Egert, the chairman of IETF, who is prompting the security area directors. The more it goes, the more I think I would like to have an RFC rather than SEC Dispatch, so that it gives time to this community here to help the draft to improve. I got offline many discussions or emails by a number of people. That's good. So there is clearly interest for this draft. But the issue is that I'm not a protocol writer. It's not that I cannot, but it's like so long I've not done it that it would take me some time, and we don't have time here. So unless you're a protocol writer in IETF, you cannot voice anything. I will be considered as a tourist, as they call it. So it's going to be very difficult. But still, the points I think, are valid. And if they don't want to recognize the point, we know what will happen. What will happen is that the vendors will have to be clever, and we will create a new middle box for ACH, and we will not resolve the problem. It will be worse. So they have an opportunity to dispatch if they would like. So I will wait that I'm a bit better, perhaps by Wednesday, to make an answer to Aker and to Stephen Farrell and to Michael. And hopefully by the time I'm offered a solution by the security area directors.
Yeah, fair enough. I know, and hopefully, as you say, by a few days' time, you'll feel more like you can pay attention to it rather than suffering from the hopefully the sort of declining effects of COVID.
And I just want to reiterate your point, or both of your points, that if people have opinions to share, please do it on the list. It's extremely helpful. Otherwise, one or two voices have a very large amount of influence. So have your voice be heard too.
Yes, thank you, Kathleen. I think there is a disconnect between people who rely on us to voice them, but they are not showing up. So it's very, very strange. I mean, not strange, because I understand talking with customers, and I think I've spoken to my 8th customer now, and they are speechless, and they are giving feedback, but they do not dare to. They don't even know how to go on the mailing list or how to participate. They just don't. Sometimes it is the English that doesn't help. Sometimes this is just the culture. They've never done it. So those people, I mean, I'm talking head of group networks of very large companies, CISOs of very large banks, and so on. And they are not just organized for that. So I know that I cannot get these people to help now. Maybe by London I could, but right now it's too short.
That raises a good point. So I don't know how many other people are adjuncts on the call, but I actually have an exercise in one of my courses where students have to do a security review of a document, and I judge them on the art of their submission as well as the technical correctness. Just an idea, because it'll train more people on how to engage in these types of forums. And then I offer guidance like, okay, you laid it on too thick. You can present yourself a little bit better, or be more concise. You just want to start the conversation, and different points of advice. But that might be helpful if more people started doing this. And I can give examples if anyone wants to reach out directly.
I agree. On another place, I'm writing. I wrote actually an entire resolution in ITU for industry engagement, But that's not a topic for now, I guess. But yes, Kathleen, I agree.
Okay, well, I guess there's an action on those of us on the call. If we think it would be a useful topic to have on the agenda, to say so on the mailing list, as per Kathleen's comments just then. So onus on us. Otherwise, as you say, Arno, may be a longer time to run up for IETF114 will be a sort of plan B. But let's see if you get any comments.
Yeah. So let's say that what I don't want is to so we had to create these drafts in very hasty mode. So I recognize that. So I don't want, quote unquote, the opposition to first of all understand it's always opposing. In fact, it's not. What I would like simply is to help the enterprise to manage their operational security with this, even with ECH. But I don't want to, because right now the only alternative would be to send it to TLS, and TLS, they are going to say, well, there is nothing for the protocol. So why is it we should even have it discussed there? So it's not going to be discussed. What we want is really to have a recording point about this is our problem with it. And the idea is to prepare the future after ECH, because I don't think I will be able to stop it. But it's more to start to get whatever we can now, so that when we have to repair whatever damage, we are at least in a position where we can do it. Yeah. So that's my only intention at the moment. So I don't want this trap to be killed in the egg, if I can put it this way. I think there are a few points that are important that have not been made so far on the browser itself, on the fact that the client-facing server is becoming a middle box, on the fact that people didn't realize the selective decrypt issue. It's not about decrypting everything. Anyway, so let's go. I will do my best to answer by Wednesday and try to have a resolution. Yeah. But if you have feedback for this draft, please send me. And thank you for those who gave feedback.
Okay, thanks, Arno and Kathleen on that. Right, stepping on through Tuesday, in session 2, the OHI working group continues looking at the sort of application of oblivious technologies. And in parallel with that, there's the IAB Open workshop, which this time is looking at measuring network quality for end users. And there's also a proposed workshop on management technologies in encrypted networks, which is being discussed at IETF114. There are obviously with this, there are other topics on the agenda for that session, but those are the two that stood out for me in that. And then in session 3, people on this call won't be too surprised to know I've highlighted the combined ADD and deprive session, which on the ADD side, the agenda includes an updated split horizon paper, which is good to see that continuing, in my view, as well as resolver info paper and DDR forwarders paper up for discussion. And those are the main elements of the ADD part of that joint agenda. And as I'm talking, sorry, answering the question that Marek's asked in the chat, after the call, I'll share the links which are embedded in these slides, which will, where they exist, will take you to the individual working group agendas, where you can see more detail on what's being discussed. In most cases, you'll find even more detail if you go to the individual working group mailing lists, where they would have sort of debated, in some cases at least, the specifics behind the agenda item headings. But yeah, there is more detail available. It's a short answer to your question, Marek. And then Tuesday evening, just for completeness, that's when we have the IETF social, which this year kindly, or this event kindly sponsored even by Comcast, which we discussed on the call a couple of weeks back, which will be extremely good and very cultural, as it's in an art gallery a few minutes, I think, away from the Sheraton Hotel. Again, I just pause in case anyone's got anything to add on any of those or any other items from Tuesday that you think I've overlooked, which is entirely possible. Not seeing any hands raised or anything in the chat, so I shall, in that case, press on. But as I said earlier, do post in the chat if there's anything else you think is worth highlighting. Rolling through to Wednesday, a few less things picked out here. One is the sort of Gen Dispatch session during session 2 on Wednesday. I think that's early afternoon, if I remember rightly. That hasn't published an agenda yet, but usually has interesting stuff. But as of now, it's impossible to say what it is. Then in session 3, there's a BOF as well as the mask session, so both taking place at the same time. And if you bear with me, because I can't for the life of me remember what the topic, the long form version of the Tigris name is. I'll just see if I can call that up on my browser screen to remind me. Where are we? Session 3 on Wednesday. Yes, so it's transfer digital credentials securely. So a slightly contrived acronym, but that may be of interest to some people, which is why I put it on there. Similarly with the mask session, I don't think when I looked, did that have the agenda? No, it does have the agenda certainly now published, but I know last time I was sort of reminded to include that because it's of general interest to people. So that's when it's taking place, if mask is of interest to you. Rolling through to Thursday, I got session 1. There's the privacy preserving measurement working group as well as the internet area working group, followed by DNS-OPS, which I pulled out a few things on the agenda from DNS-OPS, which include DNS terminology, DNS-SEC, and also filtering DNS. All 3 items of which looked to be of interest. That coincides on Thursday in session 2 with the HRPC sort of research group. That's the Human Rights Protocol Considerations Working Group, but the agenda for that's not available yet. Last time that discussed a number of topics such as end-to-end encryption, so may well be of interest, but I haven't seen the agenda as yet. And then finishing off Thursday, we got Madness is taking place in session 3, as is Privacy Pass working groups. And one of the things in Madness that just to mention is one of the agenda items is a discussion about an open roaming experiment for Madness due to take place potentially at ITF114. So they're talking about the possibility of that in Philadelphia. So if that's of interest to you, that would be worth joining. I realise I skipped over the ITF plenary. Sorry, apologies for that. Session 4 on the Wednesday, which is, in my view, always worth attending. And it doesn't clash with anything else because it's scheduled so that it doesn't. So if you're in Philadelphia, it's definitely worth going, as there's sort of literally nothing else on the agenda at the same time. Again, I'll pause there in case anyone picked up anything else on either Wednesday or Thursday that you think is worth referencing. Arno, did you pick up something else on either of those days?
No, this is a question. Do you know when the hot RFC is?
When the hot RFC session is, I don't off the top of my head. Does anyone else? Is it on? Marek thinks on Sunday. Let me just scroll back through.
It's always on Sunday evening after the meet and greet.
There you are then. So Sunday, Arno, and I
Right,
presume
so-
there'll be remote access to that.
Yeah, so that means that it's going to be late on Sunday.
Yeah,
It's like the set. I don't have it right in front of me, but it's like 7 p.m. around then.
I've just literally just found it, Tommy. It's 6 till 8 p.m. East Coast time, so fairly late if European time. Arno.
Andrew, I have a question.
Oh yeah, sure. Dive in, Paul.
So as some of you may know, I have an interest in filtering DNS, and I participate in the DNS-OARC working group, but I have no idea what they're doing. Does anybody know why filtering DNS is on the agenda in session 2?
I'll see if anyone is across that and more there.
I might have an idea, but I don't know that I can say it on a public call. I think there's another large vendor getting into this space. So that's just my inkling from hearing you say that. I didn't realize it was on the agenda, but I know one vendor is trying to figure out how to do this.
Hopefully somebody will show them the RPZ draft. Anyway, thank you.
Yep.
That was a tantalizing comment.
Andrew, it's probably worth also mentioning that on the Sunday of IETF, there's usually something called the IEPG, which usually has some interesting DNS and non-DNS related presentations on it. That takes place usually on Sunday morning.
Okay, so anyone that's actually local.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they stream it. I don't think they stream it normally. I think it's local only.
Yeah. I've just looked on the agenda for DNS Ops while we're talking. I know Dan has got time penciled in, time permitting, it says on the agenda, for the structured DNS error page.
Filter data.
Paper, which is structured data for filtered DNS. I'm just trying to see if I can find anything else that's cross-referenced. Yeah, I think that was it. It was it was Dan's paper that caused me to put it on there. Yeah, it was Dan's paper. Was the answer to the question as well, Paul. So if that's of interest, I'll give me a moment and I will pop a link in the chat so you can see that as well. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay, and then just to sort of finish running through the agenda for ITF, the only thing I pulled out from Friday was the snappily titled MAPRG research group session, which had a number of papers of interest, to be fair, one of which was the prevalence of domain name encryption and its impact on internet filtering, which I thought would likely be of interest to some people. Hence, I thought it worth mentioning. So that will certainly be worth dipping into on Friday, in my view. Again, I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts or comments or anything else that was on the agenda for Friday. I'll take silence as not. So in the interest of time, let me seamlessly roll into what's happening on Saturday and Sunday, which, as you all know, DNS-OARC 38 is taking place at the same venue for the 2 days immediately after ITF114. I've sort of highlighted just a few sessions on the agenda from DNS-OARC. The agenda is much easier for DNS-OARC because there aren't parallel sessions, so you don't have to pick and choose on these in case it's not clear. But you'll see from the morning on the Saturday. And you will recognise some of these sessions because they're the ones we've covered on this call over recent weeks and months. But Andrei Meshkov from AdGuard is showing his experiences of running a DOQ resolver on Saturday morning. And there's also a paper on the use of DOQ on authoritatives as well. And then the third one that I pulled out from the Saturday morning was external DNS on AWS in large scale, which is surprisingly hard for me to say out loud, but I think pretty straightforward. So just a bit of knowledge sharing from AWS on its deployment, which I thought was worth highlighting. And then in the afternoon on the Saturday, the session that stood out to me was performance effects of DNSSEC validation on a busy resolver, since there are different views on the likely impact of DNSSEC implementation. So I thought that was definitely worth sort of seeing. And then on the Sunday, there's a presentation by Jeff Houston, who many of you will know from APNIC on the resolvers that we use, and Jeff always gives some fantastic recommendations in my view. I'll come to you in a second, Benno. Then there's a very dodgy looking presentation on the bizarre and unusual usage of DNS.
Yeah.
No, seriously, I'm sure that'll be fun as always. So Peter's updated Rule 53 presentation, I presume.
It is, yeah. Thanks.
Which will be, I think, ideal for a Sunday morning. So good timing to have it on the schedule then. And
Quick
then
question about that. Quick question. Does that title need updating? Because we're no longer just on port 53 anymore these days, man.
Yeah, well, come on. Give me a break. I'm still calling it Rule 53. I think that's
just because.
Just because, yeah.
This talk will be unencrypted.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's it. Yes, that is my excuse going forward. Thank you, Glenn.
Moving swiftly on, and after that there's an open source DNS vendors panel, which I'm sure will be very interesting as well. Slightly more serious than the one that would have gone before, so an interesting contrast through the morning on those, which is good stuff. And then in the afternoon, again, the one which I pulled out, which some of you from the school will be familiar with, is on zero knowledge middle boxes, which Paul presented to us a few weeks back now. So I presume we'll be presenting an updated version of that in Philadelphia in a couple of weekends' time. Now, again, I know there are some people on here who pay far more attention and are far more involved, more importantly, in DNS-OARC than I am. So I don't know if there's anything that any of you want to come in on to mention regarding the DNS-OARC meeting.
Well, just one thing from me, Andrew. You missed out the fact that I'm doing a presentation on the Saturday. So I'm talking about transition of GTLDs between backend providers while our experiences of doing that while they're live.
Well, that's slightly awkward, but I'm sure it'll be a fantastic presentation. I do apologise for missing it, Brett.
All right. You can buy the lunch.
I'll buy you a cold beer. How about that?
Sounds good to
me. Anything else from anyone from DNS-OARC you think is worth highlighting?
Pretty well.
John, did you want to come in?
No, I'm sorry, program committee member here. I think you've summarized it pretty well. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of people held over from IETF to spend an additional 2 days in Philadelphia enjoying the talks. And what was it, the cheesesteak taco or something like that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. But no, I think you've summarized the panels well, or the talks well.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think there's in terms of numbers so far, last time I checked, there was just over 1,100 signed up for ITF114, of which just under 600 will be in person. I think for DNS-OARC, it's about 90 signed up in total. I can't remember the mix between remote and in person. I think the majority were in person, but I can't remember the exact split. So yeah, it should be a good 2 events. So excellent that they are back to back like this. Yeah, so I can't see. Yeah, oh yeah, I think there's a bit of clarity on what the structured error DNS error page paper will cover, in case I misled slightly on that. So thank you, those of you that cleared that up. Right, let me then just change topics slightly. Move on from that, just to highlight a few recent developments from the last week or so, just in case you're not caught up on these yet. Probably the one worth mentioning first is the addition of support for .dot in the Windows 11 or Windows Insider program, which was announced, I think, within the last week. So that's an addition of support for .dot alongside DO. Which got quite a bit of press coverage over the last week. Since we've talked about Arno and Simon's draft paper, I thought it was worth making sure there was a link to that in the slide. So that's the paper that Arno was talking about earlier, in case you've not had a chance to catch up on that yet. 2 other things just to mention. There was a written question from a member of the European Parliament asking whether there was intent for EU-wide network blocking using the European Commission's proposed DNS-4 EU resolver. Although it's a written question, the answer isn't available yet. So presuming it hasn't been answered yet, but be interesting to see what response is given to that. It's only a couple of paragraphs, the question, so it'll be interesting to see what the policy view is. And then final one just to highlight is there's quite a good paper, in my view, looking at different potential policy approaches to sort of deal with the potential fragmentation of the internet. So those of you with an interest in policy matters, that's worth a few minutes of your time if you have a spare moment or two. And then finally, just included on the slide links to the agendas that we've just been discussing for IETF114 and DNS-OARC, just so you've got those to hand. In terms of future events, there are no new ones to add to this list, I don't think. Yeah, there's plenty of stuff happening through in the period from September. Once we get IETF114 and DNS-OARC behind us, culminating as always typically by the end of the calendar year at IGF, which is this year's setting outside Europe and going off to Ethiopia for the first time I think in a while. It's not been in Europe. And then in terms of calls for papers, I should have deleted the first of those 2 on the list, so ignore that one. There's still time to put forward any papers you may wish to propose for UK NOF 50, as the deadline isn't till September, so plenty of time for that. In terms of future call topics, as you all hopefully are aware, we won't have a call next week because we'll be busy with IETF114. We will have a call the following Monday just to, whilst it's fresh in our minds, talk about some of the highlights from the 2 events. So it would be good to just catch up on those for those of you that have dipped in to the events to signpost things that others may have missed. And in terms of future topics, I'm hoping by next week I'll have a date for the session on the DNS Research Foundation that we touched on a few weeks back, because I've got a call tomorrow with Emily Taylor about that. So hopefully we'll timetable a session on that, and also the proposed panel discussion on deployment and scaling from encrypted DNS. You'll recall we were due to have a second of those with a few people that couldn't make the first one. And again, I hope to have a date for that, which will be probably during August, which I'll confirm by the time I send out an email next week. So at some point this week, that should be firmed up. I've also chased up a couple of the other ones there, trying to persuade Rode Schwartz to put up someone to talk about their DPI engine, which they claim can detect over 1,000 different types of encrypted traffic, including things like .do, TLS 1.3 and ECH, amongst many others. But they're taking a while just to persuade them to put someone forward to just talk through its capabilities in a bit more detail than is available in the press release, but I will continue to keep reminding them. Okay, and that's everything from me. So whilst I just take a sip of water, I think we're on to any other business. So is there anything, going back to any of the stuff we talked about, that you want to sort of pick up on, or anything else anyone wants to jump in on? So if there is, either sort of raise your virtual hand using the Zoom tool, or put something in the chat, or just unmute, whichever is easier for you. And I'll just pause for a moment to see if there is. Or are we all overcome with too much heat? I'm not seeing any hands raised. Not seeing anything in the chat. And no one's unmuted. Right, so I'm assuming therefore that there probably isn't. So hopefully some of you, we will see each other in Philadelphia next week. And for everybody else, have a fantastic week. And yeah, it might be slightly cooler, or at least it will have air conditioning, Glenn, which I'm definitely looking forward to that, if nothing else. I think worth going over just for a week in an air-conditioned hotel room. But don't tell my wife, she might want to come with me. Right, well, in that case, have a fantastic week. Safe traveling, those of you that are heading off to Philadelphia, and see you next week. Thanks all.
Cheers. Thanks, Andrew.